Hi, everybody. I am Christiana Limniadis. I am Program and Outreach Manager for Preservation Maryland, and we are here to talk about our brand new Maritime Heritage Grant Program. Very excited to talk to you guys about this tonight. We're going to go through all of the nuts and bolts about the program. We're going to hold off all of the questions to the end of the program. I want to answer all of your questions. I hope to get some of your questions. As soon as they pop into your head, put them into that Q&A box, and we'll answer them at the end. There is the chat box, obviously. Feel free to make a comment there, but with the size of the group and everything, make sure that I answer all of your questions. Please make sure to put those in the Q&A. And as already said, we're recording this program today, so it will be made available on our website for checking later. I think that is it. Let's hit the road. For those of you who are new to Preservation Maryland, we are your statewide historic preservation nonprofit organization. We are here to help you with whatever it is you need to fulfill your preservation destiny. We are here to provide those services. We can provide technical advocacy and, when possible, financial support for all of your preservation projects. We want to help and enable you to do those successfully. In addition to all of our work here in Maryland, we also power the Campaign for Historic Trades, which is a national workforce development program. We work with the National Park Service and many other partners to make sure that we are getting more people involved in traditional trades. We can do everything we can on our soapbox to advocate for the reuse of our historic built environment, but if we don't have those tradespeople to do that work, we're kind of out of luck. So growing that field is vitally important to the future of historic preservation. Alrighties, let's talk about Maritime Heritage now. So as I said, Maritime Heritage Grant Program, this is the inaugural year. It is administered by us, Preservation Maryland, in collaboration with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. And the goal of the program is to provide direct assistance to promote the preservation of Maryland's irreplaceable maritime heritage. It is a competitive grant application. It's going to be open once a year. And again, it is to provide that much needed support for preservation needs in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Again, for those in the audience live, all questions are going to be held to the end of the program. And if you have a question, they have to be submitted through the Q&A. That's how we'll be answering questions tonight. So again, partnership with DNR, focus on maritime heritage, and it will be open once a year starting this year. Eligibility requirements. The program is only open to nonprofit organizations and units of government. So that can be local or state government or county government, but private property owners are not, and homeowners are not eligible for this program. Just nonprofits and units of government. The program is open to all types of historic preservation projects, though. So it can be a capital project or a non-capital project. So those capital projects, it's pretty straightforward. Those brick and mortar projects, those hard costs to preserve or restore or repair our historic resources, our buildings, our resources. So those are our capital projects. Non-capital projects, pretty much everything else, all of those research projects, education projects, reports that are needed to then be able to do that advanced preservation work. Grant awards. For this year, for fiscal year 25, we have a total of $200,000 available for funding. That is a significant amount of money, and we are so excited about how many projects that we'll be able to help through that. Just for a reference, our Heritage Fund program, our signature program that we run with MHT, with the Maryland Historical Trust, that program averages right around 100, 120 on a good year in available total funding. So this is going to be a huge injection of money into the preservation field to help these maritime projects. Awards will range from $10,000 at minimum to $50,000 maximum, and all projects will require at least a 10% cash or in-kind match. So again, whatever that total project cost is, at least 10% of that needs to be provided by your organization, by that entity as a cash match or an in-kind match. And lastly, and vitally important to this program and to your application, is that this is a reimbursable grant program. If you are so lucky to be awarded a grant award, you'll be notified of such, but you will not receive an immediate check for that award. You will complete that project up front, spend that money, make those expenses, and then after the project is completed, submit all of that paperwork to us. And if everything is done the way that it was approved for in your grant agreement, then you'll receive that grant award payment as a reimbursement. Criteria for awards. Sorry, turn my paper too many pages. So the applications are going to be reviewed by Preservation Maryland staff. As applications come in, and to the best of our ability, we are going to process them and review them for completeness. So we'll make sure that all of the information that's requested in the application is in fact there. Any information that our Maritime Heritage Committee might need to further understand or better understand your application, Preservation Maryland staff is going to do their best to follow up with you prior to the deadline to make sure that all the applications are successful and complete. Once the application deadline has passed, those applications will then be reviewed by the Maritime Heritage Committee, and they'll be evaluated based on how successfully the application meets the purpose and priorities of the program. We also have a set of criteria that is included on the website. Excuse me, sorry. And so you'll see the categories that you'll be evaluated under here on the screen. We're looking at your program objectives. How does your project promote maritime history? We're going to look at that educational component of that project, the significance, that actual history and the resource that you're focusing your project on, feasibility, and the urgency of need. So those are the core criteria that you'll be evaluated on. And then each year we are going to have special consideration evaluations, some extra credit type categories that'll be based on certain themes or trends relevant to that year. And so for this, our inaugural year, we are adding a special consideration of 2 extra points for projects that have a connection to America 250 or Maryland 250. So anything celebrating the 250th anniversary of the start of this government will receive those extra 2 points in their application review. All right, onward to the application. Applications are going to be submitted online only. No paper applications will be accepted. Everything has to be put through the program that we have online. It's called Smarter Select. That is the link that you'll see on our website. It brings you directly to there. It is a free program. You do not have to pay to submit this application, but you do have to register. So you do have to make an account to be able to apply for this grant. This is the program that we use for all of our grant programs. So if you've applied for Heritage Fund before, you already have an account. You can use that same account to apply for this application. And then if you are selected, it's that same system that all of your reporting and reimbursement requests would be through. The application is open right now and it will close on October 3rd. So again, you have plenty of time to be able to get in there and submit that application form. As part of the application, and it's organized similarly, the sections to the Heritage Fund application. So if you've applied for that previously, it'll look a little familiar. Obviously the changes to the questions, but these are the information that you're going to be asked to provide in that application. If you go to the application now on the website, you're able to produce a little preview of it. So you'll be able to get a little snapshot without actually starting an application. But the application is divided into these 5 sections. The first section is questions about the applicant. So you and the organization that's the entity that is applying, information about your project, what is the name, what is the description, what's the general plan. We'll have another separate section for more additional questions about the property if you are doing capital projects. But if you are not doing a capital project, then those questions will be hidden from you. There's questions about the project budget. And then there are attachments and documentation that you have to submit. So we're going to ask you to provide some photographs related to the project or of the building in question or the resource in question. We need your IRS determination letter, your Maryland Secretary of State Charitable Organization standing confirmation. We need copies of relevant plans or estimate proposals, an actual copy of your project budget, letters of support, and then if applicable to you, a property owner letter support if you, the applicant, doesn't own the property of a capital project. Let's talk about 2 of those just a little bit. Just some guidance on the photograph. These are images from this year's Heritage Fund awardees. And so when we ask you for photographs in your application, yes, it's so that we can better understand your application, know what the resources that you're working on, especially for capital projects, see what the issues are and the damages are. That's part of our review. But we are also using these pictures as part of our marketing and our outreach for the program and raising awareness of your project and to get people some exposure for your project. So we want to make sure that the photographs that you're providing are of a quality that we can actually use. And so just for reference, here are 3 of the examples of what we have done with the photographs that have been submitted to us with applications. So here at the top is an example of a conference that was applying for money. It was the 2nd annual of that conference. They provided photographs of the previous year's conference and then images of the materials from that first conference. We were able to use those to create that dynamic image. The middle one, the great picture of the children learning how to compost. That project was, a brick and mortar project to work on a mill, but the point of fixing that mill is so they can do their work with children and expanding and outreach to composting. So that was a great dynamic representative image of what this organization does that we can use in the marketing and outreach. So again, just taking this as an example, they need to be large enough and enough pixels. They can't be, a lot of people kind of use the same images over and over again, and they're pixelated and they're not the best quality. So just making sure that you're providing the best, most successful images that you can. 2 of the items on the list was your IRS determination letter and then the Maryland Secretary of State charitable organization standings. Many people have a copy of that IRS determination letter. Boom, you can send that. That's perfectly fine. Some people don't have a nice clean copy of that letter. Completely understandable. Sometimes people have changed the name of their nonprofit and it's a little complicated to even send that letter. That one letter is actually 5 letters. So if you don't have access to that actual letter, you can use the IRS tax exempt organization search and put yourself in there and then print out, include the PDF printout of that confirmation page showing that you are up to date with your IRS requirements, that you've been filing your 990s as necessary. That's perfectly acceptable as well. And then we'll need the same thing from your Maryland State Nonprofit Registry. Again, in the program materials, they have links to these websites to look yours up on the Maryland State page. And again, get that screenshot, that PDF printout showing that you are up to date and are in good standings with the state of Maryland. And then as far as the budget goes, we don't have a template. I'm not necessarily terribly picky about the formatting and the font and the colors. Everyone creates budgets differently. That's totally fine. But the budget document that you send has to actually be a budget. It needs to include line items for all income and expenses. It needs to show where and how those line items are going to be paid for. Here you can see 2 examples from previous grants that we've offered of examples of grants that we've received, of budgets that we've received. So at the top, that very simple 3 lines that you see, yes, it's accurate. It tells me all the numbers I need to know, but that 3 lines is not a budget document. That's a list of money. So I need a budget document, and that is something more closely to what you see on the bottom form. I've covered up the actual line items to protect privacy because we never asked anyone if they wanted to share these publicly. But again, something more aligned with what you're seeing on the bottom of the screen where it shows each line item, what that scope of work is, brief description, just so that I understand what that cost is. And then is that going to be coming from the share of money that you're requesting from our organization, or is that going to be paid for by the cash match or by other funding? So again, something much more in line to what we see on the bottom. Please. All right, and then the last step of that application procedure, kind of the timeline ahead of us. As I said, the application opened in August. Right now, we are at August 27th at the virtual information session. We have 2 virtual office hours coming up on September 5th and September 26th. We started these last year with the Heritage Fund Grant Program, and they went swimmingly, so we were bringing them to this program as well. It's really an amazing opportunity to answer a lot of questions in a short, brief amount of time, and everyone that participated in it got the opportunity to hear and learn from those questions as well. So really worthwhile if you have questions about your eligibility, your project's eligibility, or physically submitting the application form. Again, the application deadline is October 3rd, 11:59 p.m. The form will close on the website right prompt. We will be taking all of October to review and process those applications, and then we anticipate making an announcement in November. If you are so lucky and wonderfully successful in getting an award, here's kind of those steps, immediate steps after and into the future. That first thing that you'll have to do is submit that grant acceptance form. That's you agreeing that you will take the money from us and follow these sets of rules and the program guidelines and all of that. As part of that grant acceptance, you're also going to confirm your project title and description. Obviously, we want them to be as closely aligned to what you're submitting in your application. And in your application materials, there's guidance on how to craft your project title and your project description. But we certainly, when we're releasing these things in our media and publicity, we want there to be some consistency in the project description. So there might be some small edits and changes to what you've submitted. So we will show you that back and make sure that you agree with the changes that we made to the project description. So that's going to be part of that acceptance form. We need a copy of your W-9. We cannot pay you unless we have a copy of your W-9. And so we ask for that upfront so that we can make that end process and reimbursement process as smooth as we possibly can. All of these grants are coming with a strongly suggested 1-year grant term. We want to infuse our preservation community with this funding and get projects completed. We've had some horrible things happen recently with people losing funding on projects. And so we want to make sure that everyone gets these projects going and who successfully gets an award. But things happen, delays pop up, we completely understand. You just have to keep us in the loop, let us know when things or you have some delays in your timeline, that's perfectly understandable. But if projects are not proceeding and extend for much longer than that 1-year grant term, then you run the risk of having that grant award repealed. As it describes in the program guidelines, all of the projects need to meet the Secretary of the Interior standards and guidelines, all relevant Secretary of the Interior standards and guidelines. So for those brick and mortar projects, those projects need to meet whatever treatment standards that project is, most likely the treatment of rehabilitation. So we need to make sure that the brick and mortar work meets standards, preservation standards and guidelines and best practices, but similarly for the reports and for any professionals that you hire. There are historic preservation related professional standards and guidelines. We want to make sure that you're also hiring consultants that meet those as well. We will work with you on that. You don't have to figure it all out on your own. There is a sign requirement and public notice requirement if you're awarded a project. We will provide you that graphic and provide you that language of what needs to be included in the reports so that the proper credit for this funding is applied. And then again, once the project is all done, you need to submit that final report and your reimbursement request, and then everything gets closed out and you get that funding reimbursed to you. That is the crash course in the Maritime Heritage Program. Again, we have the virtual office hours coming up. Please register for those. I mean, they're free and open to anyone, but because it's on Zoom, you have to register to get the link. And that's what that QR code is for. And I'm going to go open up my questions and we'll start going through the questions that you guys came up with. Excuse me. First question here is about a specific program called the Galesville Maritime Heritage Festival. Would that be eligible? Not knowing much other than the title, I apologize for not being familiar with the program before, but I mean, just by the name alone, strongly believe it might be eligible for the program. I think there were a couple other statements in here asking about for clarification of maritime heritage, right? And that is kind of purposefully vague. Our history here in Maryland is so intrinsically tied to the water, to the Chesapeake Bay watershed. There are things related to maritime history that are a little bit more stereotypical, things that are directly connected to the actual water, on the water, in the bay, in the harbor, whatever, very kind of a blatant connection to maritime history. But then there are certainly other aspects of Maryland history that are a little bit more of a stretched out connection, or maybe just not that more direct, obvious connection. The thing that's popping off right off the top of my head, because I just watched a documentary about Harriet Tubman a couple of days ago, is the story and how intrinsically tied the water was to her navigating her way through the Underground Railroad, right? And that knowledge that she passed on to others who were escaping and reclaiming their freedom under slavery. That certainly is tied to maritime history, but it's not something that's on a boat or something that's like a standard kind of conventional definition of maritime. So again, I strongly encourage you to look at the criteria and to review the program guidelines to understand the spirit of the program. We want to support all aspects of maritime history. Next question, we want to apply for capital projects under evaluation criteria. How do we address educational component? Again, that will be kind of a lot more specific answer to your actual project, and you can join us at one of the office hours or shoot me an email to give me some more specific things. But obviously just the fact of rehabbing your building and doing whatever that brick and mortar work that you need to do, there is an opportunity to educate the public of why that's necessary. So you can certainly talk about the need of why that is and how you'll be communicating that need and the work and the progress of that project to your community and to your donors or your supporters, whoever that is. Grant writing is definitely an adventure in style, and everyone has their own way of approaching questions like that. But right off the top of my head, that would be how I would recommend. Next question, is this application for all of Maryland or just the cities and counties discussed in the application instructions? I'm not sure what counties or cities that are specifically mentioned in the application, so I apologize. I'm not sure where that's specified. But yes, this is open to the entire state. Any project, any municipality, as long as the project is located in the state of Maryland, and is to the benefit of Marylander people, yes, everyone is open to apply if you meet the program eligibility requirements. Next question, how do you feel about a landed fireboat launched in 1957? I mean, I feel great about that. That sounds like a super cool resource. Not knowing more about what you want to do with the fireboat, I can't speak specifically to your application, but yes, a fireboat is connected to maritime heritage. If there were a capital or non-capital project involving a fireboat, I would think that would easily meet the eligibility requirements of the program. Let's see in the chat if there are more questions. One question here, is it recommended to submit for both a capital and non-capital applications? We have not written into the guidelines that there is any limit to the number of applications that you can submit, nor is there a limit in the number of cycles that you can participate in. If you, apply this year, get it, don't get it, you could still apply next year. We don't have those rules on the program yet, but it would be very unlikely that you would be awarded 2 projects in a year. So you could certainly apply for more than one if you are so inclined, but I find it very unlikely that the selection committee would recommend or award both of your applications. Can applications be submitted for peer review? No, we are not accepting applications for peer review. And also, keeping in mind kind of that dividing line between peer review type questions, either via email or in the drop-in sessions, versus questions about your application. I can certainly provide advice and recommendations from my point of view of whatever you're suggesting and what's said in the program guidelines. But I can't coach you on your application. I cannot provide edits or direct recommendations of how to edit your application. I'm not able to provide that level of support, but I can decipher the program guidelines for you, answer questions in that way. What the review will happen, though, once you've submitted that application, like I said earlier, is that I will be reviewing it for completeness so that you've included all the attachments that we asked for, that the attachments and answers that you answered actually do provide that information. In previous grant rounds, there's been times where I've read through someone's application and I had some immediate questions that I knew that our selection committee would likely have as well. So I went to that applicant and said, hi, would you be able to provide extra information related to X, Y, and Z? Again, we want to make sure that your application is as successful as possible and that the committee has everything they need to evaluate it. Next question is, can we request funding for a historic structures report? Yes, yes, 100%. That is definitely a non-capital expense eligible project. National Register nominations, survey work, MIHP forms, updated National Register nominations. I would love to see some updated National Register nominations, and historic structures report, certainly an eligible expense. Let me get rid of that. I've got a question about a living history project. Yes, again, living history project, a oral history project. Those are definite examples of non-capital projects. They involve some aspect of maritime heritage and identifying, collecting, evaluating that heritage. Boom, match made in heaven, definitely an eligible expense. Or eligible project, excuse me. Can the in-kind requirement be met by the labor hours of volunteers priced at market rates? Yes, exactly that sentence. In-kind hours can be volunteer hours. They could be staff time, donated staff time. They can be professionals that are donating their time. If you have a researcher or a preservation consultant, an architect, maybe you have a capital campaign and you got a roofer on the board and they said that they'll do the roof, but you have to pay for the materials. In-kind is definitely okay. And again, it has to be based on that market value, whatever that donor is saying that their time is valued at, that is what that will be. I don't have any guidelines or rules on what's I mean, it has to be at least minimum wage, obviously. But other than that, no, we have no rules on the in-kind rates. More questions. These have been all very, very lovely questions. I really thank you guys so much. I'll leave this open for another couple of minutes to see if there are remaining questions for those here in the room. But otherwise, thank you so very much, everyone, for attending tonight. Again, we're having the virtual office hours twice in September. Application is due October 3rd. I'm available via email for questions, but definitely come to the office hours if you have questions. And with that, I will mute and take myself off the screen in case there are any last minute questions. But other than that, thank you again for joining us and have a great rest of your night.